Hi. Hello.
Yeah, here's my microphone. Wonderful.
Should Hello. I am here.
Yeah, it's so good to see you.
Yes.
Finally.
Yeah,
We
we haven't
haven't
seen
talked to each other for such a long time.
indeed. Like at
2
least
minutes?
I was gonna say an hour. Like last time we
Yeah,
were like
something like this, yeah. Yeah, but it's good to be back. I'm
yeah,
really looking forward talking to Chris today because
likewise.
this is really a very interesting topic, talking about VR.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I need to find out if I should buy,
Oh, the new headset.
yes, or if I should keep it that way. Yeah,
I'm
we
I'm
will
not
see.
ready to I'm not ready to invest into VR.
You are not?
No, no. I'm not,
Hmm?
maybe I'm not a big VR fan, but also maybe I haven't been convinced fully about
Mm,
the tech and the
mm,
gameplay and the yeah. So I really enjoy like watching and like this kind of console setting, like more like so having the controller in my hand and playing in that kind of atmosphere. But I don't know. I
mm.
guess there's a hidden behind is like kind of a fear of all this virtual world where I get lost and my soul is I don't know. I have all those kind of weird um, ideas in my head still, which is
Yeah,
like obscure and obsolete. But
yeah, yeah. I totally understand what you mean. I once played Batman Asylum. Yeah, I
ach ja.
guess Arkham Asylum, right?
Mhm.
And there is one scene where you are standing on a skyscraper and look down, and I nearly died immediately because I have such a fear of
Height,
It's height,
height.
height, heights, height.
But it's nice to be
But you,
afraid of
you know
hate
what I
as well.
mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 totally.
Let's
Yeah.
say hello to some of the people in the chat. So we have wonderful Dana here. Good to
Hi.
see you again. Then we have Rick here. And Rick says, feels Batman. This channel has no BTTV emotes. Well, we need to work on
Yeah, we need
stuff
to add
like
more.
this.
I think we need to add more emoticon to this channel.
Yeah, we need
We-
more
Yeah.
slots. We need more slots. So we need more subscribers. And once we have more subscribers,
Mm,
we get more emote slots. And
I see.
life
I'm
is
so
not easy.
new.
Life is not easy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Robin, good to see you again. And Chief Master, very
Hi,
good to see you
Christmas.
too.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah. So
Thank you for
Chris is
joining us.
already waiting in our other
Waiting
group.
area.
So, as always, when I run the show here from my desk at home, we go into a little break. I will call Chris and Rufi, and then we are back in a second. So stay with us. See you soon. Here we are, back, and we are live.
Oh.
Yes. Oh, no! OBS, what are you doing? I just... I hate this tool so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Chris. Yeah, it's good to have you here.
Thank you. It's
Welcome
great
back.
to be back. Yes.
And how is life at the moment in the US?
Mm-hmm.
So it's again 2 or 3 weeks ago that we talked to each other. How's your...
Yes.
Yeah.
Life is good. You know, it is, as always, there's a lot of confusing things happening here in the US, a lot of contradictory things, but overall life is good. And, you know, I live in Los Angeles, and for us, we've been under pretty heavy restrictions for quite a while. But we actually are on the verge of seeing some restrictions lifted due to the pandemic. The cases have gone down, so
nice to hear.
so that's nice. So
yeah.
you know, that's exciting. The grandparents are vaccinated, so the grandchildren can see them, and there's a little less concern. So life is good. You know?
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we are working on. Come on, OBS! I'm not doing anything. It's just OBS switching the window of Rufina here. So okay, I get it. This is going to be my job today. Yeah, switching.
Should I maybe not move? Like,
I don't move anything. Here are my hands. So this is the proof. I will keep them here. And
no, but maybe it's me because I'm moving so much. I don't know.
Yeah, something is confusing OBS today. Yeah, but I've seen the numbers of vaccinated people in the US are really quite high already. Yeah, so that's a good sign. We are working on this here in Germany.
Yeah, how are things in Germany?
We don't have the same. We don't have the as high numbers of vaccination as the US for sure, but we have much less inhabitants. But it's a bit slow apparently, from my understanding. I mean, there has some debate on which vaccine. Like there's like two vaccines at the same time, and the politics. I'm not sure. The one had been accepted for under 65, but for the people who are above 65, there was supposed to be another vaccine. I don't know. My German is also not sufficient enough to fully understand that kind of conversation.
My German is really good, but I also don't really understand the full plans and plannings here. As always, I guess it's as quite typical for us Germans. We need quite a time to plan things and get the industry started to produce stuff, and then we will be unstoppable. So but it's really annoying. So we have this it's like a chewing gum. Everybody's talking about what's going to happen very soon, and once we are there, everything is fine, but we are not there, and we need to wait, and we need to be very patient. Here are my hands. Rufina, do you see this? I haven't done anything.
That's okay.
Let's wait a second. Maybe you
maybe I will magically stretched out.
That's really strange.
Interesting.
Okay. I'm so looking forward to be able to fly to go back to the US. To be honest, I'm like missing it. Strangely, I miss it. This is one of the places I miss the most to actually travel is actually the US. It's strange. I don't understand why, because it's there's so many other places we can travel to in Europe, but definitely like there's some great events and things happening in the US. I really miss it. So
Well, conversely, I missed the opportunity. I was really looking forward to getting out to Europe this year to see a lot of the to attend a lot of the game conferences. Well, this is fun.
That never happened before. What's happening now? We never had this.
But it doesn't happen with Juliana. It's only with your OBS.
Only with your. It never happened with my OBS before.
Well.
Yeah, but okay. So
Technology.
Maybe it's my daughter downstairs doing something, some magic on my laptop or whatsoever.
Oh goodness.
Yeah,
Or
but
maybe
I today I
maybe it's
had
a China hack.
today I had a really interesting conversation with a good friend of us, and he said, so he's working in a management position at a bigger publisher, and he said once we are allowed to travel, the first trips he's going to do are trips to their closest partners, their own studios, their contract partners, and stuff like this. So yeah, let's see when events are really happening in the way we know how they should happen.
Yeah, absolutely. But fortunately, none of this has hurt people's appetite for gaming, which is great.
Yeah.
Just a second, my daughter is here.
Yes, of course.
Just my chat.
Yeah.
So she's leaving now. She came here with a you know these I don't know. It's like little cars, but you have to use the pedals of the cars, and it's like a bike with 4 wheels.
Oh yeah.
So the young ladies are the like a biker gang here. Yeah. Like so
that's great. Yeah.
Okay, so but let's see how things will change over the next weeks and months. But let's be honest, we are quite well prepared for everything that is going to happen here at devcom, and I guess also in the games industry. So good situation. So for today, I'm still listening to my daughter. She's standing over there and whispering. A cat car, exactly. And I'm very much looking forward talking to you today, Chris, about VR. And so I'm really curious about our discussion today. But before we start, let's do, as always, a little introduction round. So, Chris, please introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name's Chris Hewish. I am president of Xsolla. Xsolla is a video game commerce company, and I've been there for a year. Before that, my whole career has been spent in the video game industry, and I've started as a designer, so I've worked in development with teams, designing, creating, got into producing and publishing games, and then got into sort of running game businesses and a couple of game studios. And that actually is part of what we'll talk about today. I had the very good fortune to work with a virtual reality studio called Survios. And then after that, another studio that worked on Walking Dead, Saints and Sinners. So, so I've been really fortunate, been in the games industry a long time, worked with a lot of really smart people, picked up a lot of great things, and have seen it from all sides of the business. So they just can't get rid of me. I'm still here.
No, it's but now the door slammed, so we are all by our own now. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
I just want to have one small question about this, but it wasn't only on VR, right? Your career, you also worked with some console and other like mobile as well, developer publisher.
Yeah, absolutely, Rufina. So I've been really fortunate. I've worked on all platforms. So started on PC back in the day. Have worked on all the consoles. Worked on mobile. So and VR. So I've been really fortunate, and a lot of different genres as well. So racing games, simulations, strategy games, RPGs, action games, shooters. Oh yeah, so it's been a lot of fun.
Okay, sweet. That's super interesting.
Talking about VR games, which was the most impressive for you so far? So which game has the highest production level or the highest level of involvement?
So there were two for me. The first one was a game called Raw Data. And that was a game that really that was just amazing. 4-player cooperative action game. It was really, really fun. And then we had Walking Dead: Saints and Sinners. That's the more recent of the two. Both were huge successes, and Saints and Sinners had a much higher production quality, being a more recent game. But both of those would be the two games that really stood out to me. Yeah.
And I guess Walking Dead was more narrative game. I'm guessing, a bit less action on.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point, Rufina. The Walking Dead game was much more of an sort of an action survival game or stealth survival game, and single player. So I'd love to talk about both of those, and just a lot of the things that I learned along the way of what goes into making a great VR game. Yeah. And we can talk about the business too. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's also the perspective, because you have a single player and you said multiplayer co-op, so that's actually quite interesting. Yeah. So looking forward. I was like very happy that you brought that topic. To be honest, so I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
I'm preparing something here in the background and still try to bring the right size of the pictures and all this stuff. So Rufina, please continue. I will.
So I think the topic that we wanted to dive in today was VR and game design, and actually so that you can share some of the perspective or best practices or that you have seen so far, like in the past years regarding VR. I mean, it's kind of that's actually the trailer that we see. Cool. Should we? How do you want to structure? Should we start with the Walking Dead first, like this kind of single player, and then we can actually dive on the other one?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fine.
Cadence, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the really cool things with both of these games, and this is I would say a concept that applies no matter what platform you're designing for or building a game for, but it's something that really applies to VR, which when you're building the game and the mechanics, think about the platform and really lean into the strengths of it and avoid the weaknesses. What we saw early on with VR is you had a lot of people that were, and you saw this in mobile as well, quite frankly, a lot of developers tried to recreate what was successful on a previous platform and just bring it over, right? And they would assume it would succeed. So with Walking Dead, this was a really great example where initially when I came in to help the team, they already had a concept for what they wanted to build, but quite frankly, it was more like a PC game. And you had floating dialogue boxes and dialogue choices and things like that, and there was no real sense of immersion. And it was like, okay, this isn't going to work. Let's try to prototype it. I always like to, I can give direction and advice, but also want to explore ideas to make sure I don't miss anything. And we tried it out, and it didn't quite work. So we did a few different prototypes. But along the way, I really was able to work with the team and bring a lot of the lessons from raw data and share, the idea of like, look, this is VR. VR is all about immersion. It's about presence. You don't want to break the sense of immersion by throwing up, things in front of the player that don't actually fit in the world. So we really ended up going in a direction that the team did a great job of really creating a real world, a real sense of presence. So I think that was a big thing that happened here. And like you mentioned, Rufina, it's a single player game. So there is a narrative to it and there is a story. And for VR, one of the things that people have struggled with is how do you give a linear story or I mean, it's not linear. There's a lot of choice and branching and all of this in the game. But how do you tell a story in VR where you can't, sort of interrupt the player with cutscenes because that breaks immersion, right? That takes the player out of a sense of being immersed in the game. So one of the things that I shared with the team was the idea of, let's step back and think about story and narrative. And we're kind of locked into thinking about it from a linear PC or console standpoint or a television or movie standpoint where you're being told a story. and there's dialogue and all of this. But if you think about the real world, which you're trying to recreate in VR, there's story all around us. There's narrative all around us. It's not just spoken narrative or, you know, written or read story. It's what you see happening in the world. When you walk out, you walk downstairs, you know, Stefan, and you see your daughter and her friend on YouTube, nobody has to say anything, but there's already a story there, right? There's a narrative forming. And that's the idea in VR, that you can still tell those kind of environmental stories, right? Every room you go into should be telling a story. Every sort of situation, every scene that you encounter, there should be a story behind it that comes through to the player without having to tell the player explicitly what it is. You know, maybe the player picks up, you know, there's the simple stuff. You pick up a book and you see someone's journal, but there's sort of more nuanced things, like you walk into a room and you see the aftermath of something that happened there. And, you know, you can start to build emotion, and, you know, maybe there's a kid's toy on the ground, you know, at the end of a blood trail or something. And that tells a story in and of itself that brings out some emotion. So that was one of the things that, you know, the team really leaned into. You know, and I think one of the more important things when you're building for VR is that whole idea of environmental storytelling.
It's very interesting that this like this kind of what you talk. I haven't even thought about the cutting scene that they actually don't exist in VR. I was actually not aware of this. Like it's very, but indeed, if you and that the cut scenes are such an important element in most of the games that we have now, because they actually advance the story. You kind of reach out to a door, and then bam, you're giving the story like on a plate. And so yeah, what does, in your perspective or experience, what is the most important element into a VR game that a game developer has to really think when starting to work on this? Like is it I mean, we talked a lot about the story, which is like kind of in the center, which is branching from that, but is there other elements that they have to think about as well?
Absolutely. So there are a few. Locomotion is a big thing in VR. You know, how you move around the world with the character. Fortunately, that is something that I think has been fairly well solved now. You know, there have been a lot of different models of locomotion that were experimented with, and I think the best practices have evolved. That was something when I was working with the Servios team on raw data. Back then, there really was no established form of locomotion. What was the best way to move a character in an action game? And so locomotion, though, is a big part of it, and that can then affect also just you know, the comfort level of the players, right? We talk a lot about VR sort of motion sickness and whatnot, and a lot of that stems from frame rate and the way you're doing locomotion. So fortunately, those things have been solved. I think the other thing people should really think about when building for VR, there's a few more. One is just the interactions in the game, and it comes back to that sense of presence, you know, and feeling that what you're doing is real in the world. In Saints and Sinners, they did a great job, or we did a great job, giving a sense of when you're using weapons, that there's actual impact and there's force. Like when you have to take a knife and put it through the skull of a walker, it feels like there's some resistance there, even though there's no resistance. But there's a little bit of a ghosting mechanic that happens with the arm. When you hit the skull, the knife won't go right in. You have to actually push it a little bit, and it tricks the brain into thinking that you're actually doing something physical. You know, we had a fair amount of that in raw data, where it was a very active game. There was sword play, a lot of gun play, and all of it felt really good and natural in VR. And you know, you were picking up the weapons. You could toss them, you know, between your hands and things like that. So there were little things that made it feel like you were really engaging with the environment. It wasn't just an abstract engagement with the environment, right? It wasn't just that, like, oh, I kind of have a cursor or I have a hand, but it doesn't really grasp anything, and I just, you know, sort of magically click and move things around. You know, we didn't do that. It was really, it felt like you were really there picking up items, using them. And there's a number of tricks, like I mentioned, with the knife. There are a number of things that you can do. And again, there's a lot of data about this out there now. But there are things that you can do that trick the human mind into thinking that you actually are holding something or encountering resistance, which is pretty amazing. And then, we applied that in Saints and Sinners to just the concept of stamina and weight. So weight, we gave weight to the objects and the weapons. There was sort of, they balanced properly when you held them, so that depending where you might hold a stick, right, or a bat or something, and swung it, that would affect sort of the momentum or the perceived momentum and the impact and all of that. So, it all goes back to that core word of presence, which is so important in VR. And that's the thing so many people don't take into consideration when they're making a VR game, right? When you've made a 2D game, you don't have to worry about presence. You worry about locomotion and controls to some degree, but you're not really worrying about presence and doing things that increase that feeling of presence, and at the same time avoiding things that break presence.
Chris, when I was at GDC the last time, 2 years ago, I have seen a lot of VR specialized equipment you could use, like having these very impressive suit where you could walk like in Ready Player One, and all this stuff. How important is this at the moment for VR games? Do they play any kind of role in developing games, or are they just test objects at the moment and toys and nothing more?
Yeah, Stefan, they're neat, and they really can add to that sense of immersion and presence, but they're still a peripheral at the end of the day. It's a niche peripheral for kind of what's still a niche product, right? And our platform. So it's tough. I think, unfortunately, those devices have, taken a bit of a hit during the pandemic because they had more of an application in VR arcades, right? Where the arcade owner was creating a full experience and people could go to experience that. But for the at-home user, not so much. And then it's one of those age-old problems as well when you have a peripheral. No matter how good the peripheral is, you still have to get developers to integrate it into their games, right? Yeah. So that's tough. But on the hardware front for VR, the most important thing, and where we have seen a lot of advancements, and we're continuing to see advancements, there's obviously the fidelity of the headsets, but there's the whole idea of something called 6 degrees of freedom. So in VR, you've had either 3 degrees of freedom or 6 degrees of freedom. And the 6 degrees of freedom is where you can actually look all around you. You can move your hands around you, in front of you, behind you. So you really truly are in a world, a 360-degree world, and you have the freedom of movement to move anywhere within that world. And initially with VR, that was restricted to these tethered headsets, and you had to put cameras up everywhere, right? And that was pretty tough to get into. But we've seen with the Oculus Quest, where they kind of are doing this inside-out tracking, and you're starting to see that inside-out tracking technology coming in other hardware now. And what that means is the headset tracks from the inside out. It's not outside in. And it tracks where your hands are and where you are. And that means you don't need cameras. You don't need to tether the headset to a computer. So it gives you more freedom of movement, which is a huge plus for
And
I want you to go back a little bit about when you talked about The Walking Dead, because you said it was, I believe is what you said, but it was a PC game, PC version at the first, and then you actually moved it to VR. So what is that correct, or am I confused?
No, it was always I understand. Yeah, it was always designed as a VR game.
Okay.
Initially, one of the early prototypes, and you see this with a lot of VR games, the initial prototype, the gameplay and the interactions felt more like a PC game, right,
I see.
than a VR game.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I see. Because my question was going to be, if you have a PC, if you have already an existing game that then you're moving, like you're porting it to VR, what are the what should you be careful about? What should you be looking at to or the mistakes that you can do when you do this kind of portage?
Well, I'll give sort of a pithy answer. Don't do it. You know, to me, that's kind of like when in Hollywood where people would take 2D movies and then in post-production turn them into 3D movies, right? And I look, that's a snarky thing to say. The reason why, certainly people have done it, right? We've seen some popular examples. There was a neat thing with Resident Evil. What was it, Dragon Age maybe, I think did it. I might be getting that confused. The problem is, when you're building in VR, and a lot of people don't appreciate this, especially if they haven't worked in VR, it's much more like AAA development than you would think. And why do I say that? Earlier on, I mentioned that frame rate plays such a huge factor in the comfort level of VR. And immersion is so important that you're trying to push as high quality fidelity as you can, right? At least with the games that I've worked on, we're really trying to make you feel like you're in a real world, not an abstract world, which is fine. There's great abstract VR games. Beat Saber is an amazing example of that.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to put somebody make them feel that they're in a real world, everything needs to be optimized at the highest level possible so that you can get as much fidelity, as high resolution, while maintaining a smooth frame rate and experience. So the models, when you're building models for VR, it's much more like AAA, right? Because you're really building these models that are highly, highly optimized. And that goes for the rest of the environment and the rest of your mechanics, your gameplay mechanics. You really have to look at your features and your mechanics and get those optimized so they're running incredibly efficiently. And if you're taking an existing PC game and trying to port it over, PC games have the luxury of not often having to care about optimization, right? Because you're on a PC and you can be a little less strict because you have such a powerful machine to work with, and you're just doing a 2D experience, right? And if your frame rate drops a little bit here and there, no big deal, right?
I see it.
So it's tough. You can certainly do it. If you are going to do it, really focus on look at your mechanics and the controls and redesign your controls for VR. The locomotion, as I mentioned, is a big thing. Combat, how does that feel? It's not just clicking a button and hitting something. So those are some of the areas you need to look at, and then how are you telling story? If you rely on a lot of cutscenes, if you rely on a lot of dialogue choices, that's going to be a little tough. Your whole UI has to change. If you're opening your inventory, right? Now you need that to be appearing on screen in the game world, right? Versus just taking over the screen. So your whole UI UX needs to change.
So it's almost like redeveloping everything. Okay, but yeah.
Chris, I have a question regarding the market of VR games. So if I get these numbers right here of Saints and Sinners, it's nearly 4,000 very positive reviews and also a few hundred recent reviews. So it looks like normally they say it's around about 1% giving reviews. Sorry. So that might be a number of 40,000 copies sold or stuff like this. How big, how relevant is the market of VR games at the moment? Sure.
So, and a full caveat, I'm not working with the team there, so I don't have recent data or anything like that. It's been a little while. But going on publicly, what they've published or announced publicly, they did announce a month or so ago that they had crossed 29 million in sales, in revenue, for Saints and Sinners,
Wow.
which is an amazing accomplishment for any game, much less a VR game. So, you can do some back of the napkin math and see, what that would equate to. I think I was doing some research before, the call today, and it looks like VR headsets over the past 3 years have sold somewhere between 16 and 17 million units, right?
Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, it's still a tiny part of the overall industry, but it's been increasing every year. And the Quest, I think, really, to me, that's a great piece of hardware. It's not the most powerful of the options, but it is the most accessible, and it's truly kind of like its own little console. It was really encouraging to see Sony. They reiterated their commitment to VR. They're redesigning their headset and all of that for PS5. So I think the market's really strong. And then I was reading just last night about Apple, and there was somebody in the supply chain there, one of these supply chain analysts, which I think, by the way, side note, is a fascinating thing, that somebody is a supply chain analyst for just Apple, and it's such a big business that's what they can do to predict. But they were saying that it looks like Apple's mixed reality / virtual reality headset will be coming out sometime middle of next year. And I think that combined with Quest will be another real not resurgence, but uptick of opportunity for VR.
Yesterday I had 2 days ago, I guess it was, I watched James Cameron's Avatar on TV. It was on our public TV here in Germany. And I once again got lost in this visuals and art style and all of this. And then I showed some of this stuff to my son, who's turning 12 in a few months. So it was the first time that he saw this, and his mind was just bursting. And he asked me if this will be something he can watch in VR. And I was sitting there like, that's a damn good question. So when will it mix? Yeah, when will we have the VR TV movie experience and all this kind of mergers? So what do you think about this? What can I tell my son? Will we be able to be part of that world soon, or is it just science fiction?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I'll give that 5 to 10 year answer, which really means no idea. Whenever you hear somebody say a technology is 5 to 10 years away, that is it's possible. It will probably take longer than we think it will. Look, having said that, I think it's kind of a chicken and an egg thing. In order for it costs a lot to develop a film that way, right? There are additional costs in order to do that. It's technologically possible, but right now the market is not there in regards to the number of people with hardware who could make it economically viable to cover those costs, right? So, it's like, but then people aren't adopting the hardware because there isn't this kind of content to drive them into adopting it. So I think what that means to me is we're still at that earlier stage where prices haven't come down enough and there hasn't been enough broad adoption in order to create a viable market for filmmakers to actually do that. I think just talking about Apple with their headsets, I think when you get a big mass sort of hardware company like that, mass consumer company coming in, that is, their audience is more than games, right? It's not just gamers. That starts to be interesting. Where maybe that can start to create an audience and enough headsets getting sold. But I think we're still a ways off. Yeah.
I was gonna make that conjunction between Apple coming with the headset, and I was like, oh, it's definitely not a gaming company, and it's a consumer company. They also have been doing this kind of the Apple TV and these devices. So I was like, oh, is there actually a sign from Apple that's saying, oh, we actually want to enter that market? Not so much maybe in games. I'm not sure about this, because we also saw Google and Stadia saying, oh, we don't produce any more video games. But is it like also Apple saying, we believe in this market, and in terms of like movie and TVs and series to be on VR, and we actually investing into the device, and then we're actually gonna push the producers and the directors and the company and the broadcasting company to have more content on that. So, and then I'm thinking about Netflix. What's going to happen with Net? This should be the next one.
Exactly. I mean, look, we all know that, you know, if there aren't if there is not a really neat Black Mirror VR experience out there at some point, then the world just is not right, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, every time Apple is developing a hardware, it became, in the last 10 years at least, it became some kind of game changer. Let's be honest. Yeah. So if they push a VR, AR headset into the market, that's quite a statement, right?
Yeah. And I'm not sure if I'm remembering this wrong. I know they've done a lot of patents around AR and mixed reality. And I believe it was Apple that had one recently where you could project images onto any surface in your environment through the headset. So,
no idea.
You know, that starts to open up the whole idea of being able to reskin your world, right? Not just view content. I mean, on the one hand, you could put on the headset and you could look at your living room wall, and now you have a giant screen, right? Which is just pretty amazing. But then the idea that you can actually transform your environment with overlays is pretty neat. I mean, it did get real science fiction-y in this announcement about the Apple hardware. This analyst was saying next year for the headset, he was saying, I believe 2023, I believe, for the glasses, and then 2030 for, of all things, contact lenses.
Oh,
So,
wow. Oh, wow.
yeah. So,
You know,
Wow.
every time when we talk about Apple doing stuff, they normally do it right, yeah? And they
Yes.
bring something really successful to the market. And nearly every time, Microsoft did it before, but not successful. And therefore, I thought I need to check out what happened to the HoloLens, and it's still out there. I completely forgot it, to be honest.
So, yeah, I mean, HoloLens, look, that's an example of another area that AR and mixed reality that's a technology that has found adoption in areas other than video games. So, you know, there's been a fair amount of enterprise usage, whether it's manufacturing or research and development. Real estate, I think, is one of the more, you know, well-known examples of being able to virtually tour environments without having to go there in person. But, you know, HoloLens, you know, Microsoft, you know, they're like you said, they usually have done it first, and they just don't. They're so big that, and they're not focused as much on entertainment as you know. Apple's kind of, we think of Apple as purely entertainment, even though they're getting beyond that, and they're getting into health in a big way, which is going to be huge for them. But we often forget that Microsoft is huge in all these other industries, right? Yes. And that's where we've seen this hardware have a lot of success.
Yeah. And I guess the combination of both, yeah, Apple for the mass market, Microsoft for driving technologies and opening the industry, that shows quite clear where things are going, I guess, right? So
exactly. And then poor Google, you know.
Yeah. Oh, Google Glasses. Yeah. So,
But they sure are good at helping us research things, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah, definitely. So, Chris, we only have, I guess, around about 10 or 15 minutes max,
Yeah.
yeah.
left. So we have two questions in the chat, or two comments here. Dana said, Phasmophobia was quite a good, cool game for VR. Personally, I think that horror games work incredibly well for it. Do you think that VR is good and useful for every genre, or will there be VR typical genres like such horror games? What do
Great
you think, Chris?
question. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I no, not every genre is right for VR. You know, I think it goes back to what I had mentioned earlier on. You really need to build the games for the platform. And, you know, any game that is going to be where you're trying to drive a sense of emotion or tension or stress from the environment and from your interactions with it, VR is great for. You know, you're not going to do necessarily a sports game in VR. You know, there are other games that you can do, racing games, sure, but does it really add anything? You know, you're probably getting a better experience outside of VR, quite frankly, for that. You know, RPG games, horror games, adventure games, you know, those are all rhythm games, Beat Sabers, you know, those are all really good in VR. And I think one of the things that I didn't talk about with Saints and Sinners that was very, very important and is really important to a lot of VR games that people miss, they don't think about when they're building VR, is sound and the importance that positional audio plays in a VR game. And not just the sound you're hearing, but the sound you're making, right? And you can now really have a relationship in this game where sound plays a very important role, more so than because you actually are physically making that sound and you're actually hearing it in your head positionally where your head is in the environment. You're not watching it third person or even first person. So I think audio plays a huge part, and horror games are just, I mean, they're the best source for, you know, using audio. Yeah.
And we have another question or comment here in the chat from Todesscharf saying extremely valid point, I guess, as in terms of your answer about my Avatar movie question. As long as the potential audience is only 14 million, I don't think we will see any high value production, be it games or movies. In addition, I don't think classic movies would work in VR from an artistic perspective. Okay. I'm not sure if I would agree on the last point. Yeah. That classic movies would work from the artistic perspective. But
yeah, I'm not sure. The thing that immediately comes to mind for me when you talk classics, now I'm going way back, right? Is Casablanca, and you know, that kind of classic. How it's interesting, you know. It would be great to recreate a classic movie for VR with digital technology, so that you actually are in that environment. But just streaming and watching a movie in VR, you know, that doesn't hold a lot of appeal, at least for me.
Yesterday, or on Sunday, I'm a little bit confused today, as you easily see. On Sunday evening, I had to check out Wikipedia and all the movie websites to understand how many parts of Avatar are going to be produced. And only there are 5 movies overall planned, so 4 to come, if I got it right. And the production budget just for the second part of Avatar is estimated to be around about $1 billion. So, yeah. And I guess we need those massive budgets to open the market for 3D, VR, mixed realities, if we want to see movies on our VR or mixed reality glasses. That's
Yeah.
my opinion. I think it will not change slowly. We need to have this big bang and this big hype all over. Maybe, and that's really interesting. If you say Apple is going to launch their new headset in the middle of next year, which is quite close to the release date of Avatar 2.
Oh,
Sherlock Reichert is combining. Yeah. Let's see. I guess they need something like really cool entertainment coming from movies
yeah.
to convince people to use it more than just to play games or to use it for augmented reality stuff.
When is the Avatar game for Massive planned to be released?
Oh, I have no idea. Honestly,
it's a
I
good
didn't.
question.
I wonder is that also connected to app? No, I'm kidding. I don't know.
I know there's the mobile game in development, right?
Yeah.
No, but I'm not sure what other games are being developed for it.
It would be so Massive doing a mobile game.
No, I don't
that's
think
really
that's
interesting.
massive. That's somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm very much looking forward to see what technology is going to bring us, and also in terms of community management in a game. That's going to be really challenging too. So to use a chat while you are in a VR game or to communicate with other players. Have you seen working solutions for this, Chris? Have you experienced games with a good multiplayer feature?
Yeah,
Feature
so
set?
Raw Data had a good multiplayer
okay.
experience, and you're right. Doing chat, doing that kind of communication, I mean, that just doesn't really work in VR. You can bring up virtual keyboards and all of that stuff. You can connect the keyboards to, depending what headset you have. But really, forget about all of that. It's all about voice, right? And it's amazing to be able to talk to somebody in VR. People think VR is kind of an isolating experience. It's a single player experience. But if you're playing a multiplayer game in VR, being able to turn around and talk with the person who's next to you is so it's obviously natural, and it is so powerful. So this comes back to audio, having the sound be sort of located, have it drop off over a distance, have just the audio function like it would in real life, allows you to have a really connected experience with other players. You can shout across the room, you can whisper, right? If you and a buddy are right next to each other and you're just enemy nearby. So while you don't have the same tools as keyboard and chatting and text, you have your natural form of communication, which is the spoken word. And if you do that properly, it adds more immersion to the game, and it provides something you can't get anywhere else. And in fact, that last comment, that's my number one sort of approach to developing on VR. The number one question that I challenge teams with is, can you experience this on another screen? If the answer is yes, don't do it. Build something that you can only experience in VR, right? And that's true for any platform, but especially VR. And if you're building something and it's like, well, okay, I can do that on another screen, then the reality is there's a bigger budget team that's going to do it a much better job of it on that other screen. So you're fighting a losing battle. So lean into what can only be done in VR, and that's the immersion and the sound and that sense
That's
of
a really
presence.
good point. I completely agree. So we have two more comments from Todesscharf in the chat. So first he says, Rufina, if I'm informed correctly, the game from Massive is supposed to launch with the first new film.
Okay.
And the second thing is, oh no, I meant it in a sense of the movies, how we are experiencing the movies now. Yeah, so that what he meant by saying, I don't think that classic movies would work in VR, because you normally have the director who can play with camera angles and all this stuff. So that's what I meant. Yeah. So yeah. I guess it needs to change the way we use artificial intelligence to produce movies. So once we want to have a VR experience in a movie, I don't see a director doing everything as we did it in the last decades. I guess we will see much more AI doing these, or giving the player the opportunity to interact with the movie. Otherwise, I don't.
I was gonna.
Yeah.
There's a lot of merging, like not merging, but we see a lot of gaming companies helping and moving into the film industry. Like for example, Virtuos, a huge art and outsourcing company from China, helping, and like they had been working on Star Wars and on the animation part. So I think if we talk about, I'm guessing that when we talk about VR movies, we can automatically think about, can we actually being helped by some video games companies to help to make this game more, this movie more, I don't know, like entertaining or whatever. But I'm guessing those two industries are gonna at some point get closer and closer, and maybe and not merge, because I think it's more synergies between them. I think even Tencent definitely is involved. But Virtuos for me is one of the most, because they started from the video game industry and they had been also moving into the industry. I had another question about what do you think what are the elements or game design elements or technical elements that still need to be breaking through or have to be advanced more, like in VR? Like you talked about Locomotion, we talked about the stories, but what are the next one that are still not there yet to be fully advanced? So yeah.
Oh, that's a really good question. I hadn't thought too much about that. I think it honestly, for me, and I'm sure I'm missing something here, but for me, it is about, I think we've gotten the basics. I think there's a common language now, a common design language about what works and what doesn't work. So at this point, it's more about the fidelity. It's about getting the games, at least if it's the type of game you want to make, getting them feeling more realistic, right? So the visual quality, just getting that increased.
Yeah.
I think honestly, the biggest thing for me is still the external factor of just the hardware, and having hardware that's comfortable with good battery life, that the tracking is really accurate. And when I say tracking, what I mean is the ability for the headset to track the controllers in your hands, where they are and where they are in the world. So increasing the fidelity of the tracking and making sure there's no loss, being able to track when your hands are behind you, things like that. So, for me, it's more about, it's what everybody talks about, the hardware. But then in the game design itself, it really is about just the fidelity. I think one of the things, and this was something I pushed both with Raw Data and Saints and Sinners, and personally why I think part of why they were successful is the length of the game. We treated these like real full loop games. It wasn't just a short experience. It was like, no, we need at least an 8 to 10 hour game here. So I think treating VR games as games and not just short little demos or short experiences. And I know that's hard because not everybody has the funding to do that. I think, one of the things that can really benefit VR development and allow VR companies to sort of hit over their weight, develop a game that feels bigger than the team, is to lean more into system design. This is something that I'm a big advocate for. It across all platforms, but especially VR, because you tend to have smaller teams and smaller budgets, is don't try to hard code every experience, which there's a tendency to do because you want to create something so immersive, but that's going to create a shorter offering. really lean into building systems that can extend the gameplay. So I think that's another important thing to consider.
I'm, as always, the bad guy saying we are running out of time. So we need to take care, Chris, that you can do your
on
next meeting and appointment
Yes.
right on time. So it was
Thank
wonderful
you.
having you in the show
Yes.
again.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
next month, our Twitch features will start again. So
Good
right
news.
now, I'm very much, honestly, I'm really grateful that we have this familiar atmosphere here, and not thousands of people watching us, but because we can, it feels very comfortable and very familiar. In the next months, we will talk in front of thousands and millions of people. So prepare yourself for that.
We have prepared.
Good. Well, as always, it has been a pleasure, Rufina, Stefan.
Likewise. Thanks for joining
And to
us.
the audience out there, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So
Thank
look
you
forward
so
to
much.
next time.
So it's
Yeah,
time to
looking
say
forward to it.
goodbye. We
Thank
are
you.
going to finish everything now, and I'll switch
Okay.
to the end screen. So thanks
right.
for joining us today. You have been a wonderful audience as always. Take care, everybody, and let's talk soon.
Thank you.
And don't miss
Bye.
our next shows. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.